Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar today. Our topic for this webinar is the New Jersey Energy Storage Rebate Program, and this webinar is a presentation of the Energy Storage Technology Advancement Partnership, also known as ESTAP. ESTAP is managed by the Clean Energy States Alliance, and our host for this webinar is Todd Olinsky-Paul. Todd is the project director for ESTAP. And before I pass it over to Todd, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping slides. All of our participants to this webinar are in listen-only mode. This means that you can hear us, hopefully, but we can't hear you. You have a couple of options to join the audio portion of this webinar. You can connect using your computer mic and speakers, or you can call in using your telephone, and there are some instructions on your screen and on your webinar console for doing that. A very important note, we encourage all of our attendees to submit your questions as you think of them throughout the webinar by typing them into the question box on your webinar console and hitting send. We'll be reading through your questions as we get them, and we will have some time at the end of our presentation for a Q&A with the audience. So type your questions in as you think of them. We'll get to as many as we can. And finally, this webinar is being recorded. You will find a recording of this webinar, as well as all of our previous webinars, on our website at CESA.org/webinars. And we'll also be sending you an email with a link to that recording. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to our host for this webinar, Todd Olinsky-Paul. Todd?
Thank you, and welcome everybody to the webinar. As Samantha said, this is an ESTAP webinar, and we're very pleased to have Scott Hunter here from the New Jersey BPU to explain and answer questions about their new energy storage program. But before we get to that, I'll do a little bit of background for those not familiar with ESTAP or CESA, and then I'll introduce Scott. Can you advance the slide, please? I want to first thank Dr. Imre Zsuk of the U.S. Department of Energy, Office of Electricity, Delivery, and Energy Reliability, and Dan Borneo of Sandia National Laboratories for supporting our program in energy storage. Next slide, please. The program, ESTAP, is a project of CESA. CESA is a nonprofit that works primarily with states and with federal agencies to implement effective clean energy programs and policies. And so our ESTAP program is done under contract with Sandia with funding from DOE, and basically the program aims to support federal, state, joint demonstration projects in energy storage, and also to support state efforts in energy storage policy and program development. So it's under the latter goal that we are presenting this webinar today. The New Jersey program is offering rebates and incentives for smaller behind-the-meter systems, and our demonstration program under ESTAP is really more supporting larger utility-scale projects, but we're still very interested in the smaller systems and in supporting the states in their efforts to get these systems built and in the results of that. So next slide, please. So I just want to point out that if you have received the invitation to this webinar from a colleague or found it somewhere online and you'd like to be on our email list to get notices of future webinars, you can go to our ESTAP page at the CESA website. Just Google CESA ESTAP, and you'll find a button to sign up for our mailing list, and you'll also find our ESTAP webinar archive. You can see that on the left menu with the arrow pointing to it. We record and archive all our webinars, so we now have several years worth of archived webinars that you are free to review at any time, along with the slides, which you can download. And all of our reports, our newsletters, and all the other stuff that we produce, which is all free and available to be accessed through our website. Next slide, please. So I want to introduce today's guest speaker, Benjamin Scott Hunter. Is the Renewable Energy Program Administrator in the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. Since May of 2004, he's led the implementation of the state's market development programs and policies, which include the state's Clean Energy Program's annual multi-million-dollar budget for solar, wind, biomass, and energy storage grants and rebates, the Renewable Portfolio Standard, which provides nearly $500 million of support for clean electricity generation annually, and the state's net metering and interconnection standards, which provide streamlined procedures for customer-sited grid interconnected renewable energy systems. The incentive programs have provided more than $2 billion for the installation of over 10,500 renewable energy systems exceeding 1.6 gigawatts of electricity generation capacity in New Jersey. So Scott's a very busy man, and so we're very honored and pleased to have him here. And before I turn it over to him, I just wanted to reiterate that you should enter your questions for Scott through the question panel on your screen as he's presenting. Don't wait till the end. We have 124 people as of this moment participating in this webinar. We'll try to get to all your questions. We probably won't get to all of them, but your chances are better if you go ahead and send those questions in earlier. Okay, with that, I will turn it over to Scott Hunter.
Thank you, Todd and Sam. I appreciate the opportunity to present today. As Todd suggested, I work for the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, and the Board of Public Utilities is an executive agency in New Jersey state government. We have 5 commissioners, and our president is a member of the governor's cabinet. The board regulates much of the state's electric industry, natural gas, telecommunications, and water industries, but not all of it. There are some utilities that are not under the board's jurisdiction, and our programs and the programs I'm about to discuss today are limited to ratepayers that are 1999, New Jersey restructured the board-regulated electricity and natural gas market, bringing competition to the service of generation and both electricity and the end-use natural gas markets. And that law that restructured the electric industry and the gas industry we refer to as EDICA, was the Electric Discount and Energy Competition Act. In the provisions of that law, the board was given the responsibility to develop markets for energy efficiency and renewable sources of electricity. And toward this end, these tools included a societal benefits charge, net metering and interconnection standards, and a renewable portfolio standard. The purpose of this slide is to demonstrate that these programs are oftentimes referred to as market transformation programs, which are designed to change the market as well as change as the market changes. We've got quite a few influences on how these markets develop and the policies that we operate under. But as you can see, the Electric Discount and Energy Competition Act had 3 primary tools, and it also defined the New Jersey Class 1 resources that are to be developed by these tools. The societal benefits charge is a non-bypassable surcharge on every kilowatt hour sold and every therm sold by a regulated utility in the state. And those funds serve several purposes, but for the purpose of energy efficiency and renewable energy market development, we use those funds in the program that we called New Jersey's Clean Energy Program. To develop the funding levels that we collect through the societal benefits charge for the clean energy program, we were directed in ADECA to convene stakeholders in a CRA process, and that refers to a comprehensive resource assessment. And you'll see that referred to throughout this presentation. It's designed to work with stakeholders to analyze the needs of the market and the particular markets that will be served by societal benefits charge funds, and make a recommendation based upon stakeholder input on what the funding levels collected should be. And the Renewable Portfolio Standard is designed to promote renewables of those different classes defined in the Act through a requirement that the third-party suppliers and basic generation service providers of generation service in the electricity markets procure a portion of their retail sales of electricity from Class 1 and Class 2 resources. And then net metering and interconnection standards, the law asked us, or the law directed the board to develop streamlined processes for interconnecting Class 1 renewables behind the customer's meter and develop a method for valuing the electricity. So these programs and these tools were used to develop the markets in response to some policies and inputs from subsequent laws, such as the Solar Advancement Act and the Solar Act of 2012. The Renewable Energy Task Force recommended some changes and some approaches to the Renewable Portfolio Standard that you'll see in our RPS rules to date. The solar transition was a response to the RPS changes in 2006 that increased the requirements to 2% by 2020 and recommended getting away from rebates and putting more of the onus and the burden of developing the solar market on the Renewable Portfolio Standard. The Global Warming Response Act gives the utilities an opportunity to participate in these markets if there's an unmet market need. And then the Energy Master Plan, every 4 years, the board is to lead the other cabinet members in the state in an exercise planning for the sources and uses of energy for the next 20 years. And we've recently come out with a revision to the Energy Master Plan from 2011 that addresses a lot of lessons learned and policy needs that were discovered as a result of Hurricane Sandy, which struck New Jersey in 2012. And then the Offshore Wind Economic Development Act adds an OREC opportunity, basically a fourth market to be served by the Renewable Portfolio Standard. The opportunity for renewable electric storage in New Jersey, as I inferred earlier, was really made known to us with Sandy, and we received a lot of criticism for having so many solar systems installed in the state that weren't able to operate when the grid went down. We didn't have 42,000 solar systems back then, but we do now, and so that Todd remind me later to update my bio. Sorry, I misspoke. We've got over 42,000 renewable systems. The lion's share of those are solar systems for 1.6 gigawatts of solar capacity and about 70 megawatts of wind and biopower that have been provided incentives through the Clean Energy Program or the Renewable Portfolio Standard located within New Jersey. And those tools that I recommended or I suggested earlier, described earlier, are responsible for New Jersey being third in the nation in total installed cumulative solar PV capacity. So as with any other or many other markets that we look at funding through the societal benefits charge, our first step was undertaking a market potential study, and the Navigant study back in 2012 suggested we had 750 megawatts of technical potential for renewable electric storage, for load shifting, energy bill management purposes, and potentially 52 megawatts for frequency regulation. And those numbers were based upon the amount of installed capacity that was anticipated for the period through 2016. It suggested significantly more offshore wind than we have available. Currently, we have no offshore wind installed, but it understated the amount of solar PV capacity that we would have installed. So for the purposes of discussing the market potential of electric storage with stakeholders, this study was a good way to get started. But those numbers are technical potential and not economic potential, which could explain or does explain why we don't have that capacity installed through 2016 as the study suggested we could. But the second part is using that study, or was using that study, to work with stakeholders towards developing a funding level recommendation for energy storage, and we started that in the Comprehensive Resource Assessment in 2014, or for 2014, and we worked with a renewable storage working group in 2013 and came out with our first storage solicitation in fall of 2014. Having no experience with electric storage, we thought that a solicitation, a competitive solicitation, would be the best way to get a handle on the potential benefits and potential costs and what the requirements would be for an incentive to make these projects financially viable. The solicitation went out in October of 14, and we made awards for 13 projects in March of 2015, and I'll discuss the results a little later, but basically those results informed the stakeholder process for the Comprehensive Resource Assessment for 2016. And typically in our budgeting cycle, those decisions are made by the board in June of every year. Our fiscal year start in July 1st. So with this fiscal year program, we recommended a rebate program and a solicitation, bifurcating the funds. The recommended funds is $6 million, half for a rebate program and half for a competitive solicitation. And the order where the board approves the rebate program came out in December of last year, and we anticipate our rebate program opening on March 1st of this year. The 2015 objectives really were to learn more about the uses of electric storage and the economics of electric storage when it's coupled with a New Jersey Class 1 renewable. And we're limiting the application. We recognize there's a lot of applications for electric storage. We're limiting our solicitation and our incentives for those that are coupled with a renewable energy source, because our statutory authority comes from the ADECA law, which directs the board to develop markets for energy efficiency and renewable energy. So without that law, we wouldn't have the authority to make incentives available for the development of storage unless it has that direct connection to a renewable energy source. We give preference to projects, or last year in the program gave preference to projects that demonstrated an ability to be construction completed in a short period of time, and we gave or structured the incentives so that they would be reduced if a project did not complete construction within a year. We established maximum incentive amounts to spread the wealth and to diversify the use of the funds to reduce the risk of projects not completing. And we prioritize projects that were defined as public and critical to help realize that resiliency benefit from the installation of storage with renewable energy sources, benefiting our ratepayers. Here are the results from that fiscal year 15 solicitation. And of the 13 projects that were awarded, we have 4 that are still under construction. The others have all canceled, and they've canceled their incentive commitment because they were relying upon revenues from participation in the PJM frequency regulation market. But you can see we've got projects that range from 250 kW to 1.5 megawatts. All were lithium-ion projects, and all 13 were on public and critical facilities. And they requested anywhere from $70 to $500,000 in incentives. We had $3 million to award. And the biggest takeaway of this was that all the projects that we awarded incentives to plan to participate in the frequency regulation market, and that was their one of the prime sources of benefit for the project. We saw a unlevel playing field basically among the projects that were proposing that they were not going to participate in the frequency regulation market, that they would be primarily energy bill management or demand reduction type of projects, load shifting projects with a backup secondary use. But they're not, by not participating in the frequency regulation market, they needed more incentive. They were less likely to be built in a timely fashion. They didn't have renewables associated with them, so they ranked less high as the 13 that we awarded an incentive to. But in order to level the playing field for these different types of use cases, we transitioned the incentive from a competitive solicitation to an incentive that's based upon the energy capacity of the proposed facility. And we came up with an incentive amount of $300 per kilowatt hour that was based upon these results. Basically, none of these projects at $300 per kilowatt hour would have gotten a higher incentive than they proposed that they needed in last year's program. So that's why I provided these slides and gave these introductory slides on the development of this program to show that this is an evolutionary process. We anticipate that our incentive programs, particularly for renewable electric storage, will evolve and will change as we learn more about the costs and the benefits of these technologies. So for this year's program, we took those results and worked with stakeholders to develop a recommendation to the board that was approved in June of 2015 that allocated half of the funding requested to this open enrollment program, rebate that's based upon first come, first serve when complete applications are received. And then the subsequent $3 million is to be used in a competitive solicitation that will be developed based upon research that's currently being undertaken by Rutgers University's Laboratory for Energy Smart Systems. And RULESS is currently collecting information on costs and benefits of storage. They're doing some Monte Carlo simulations of different use cases that look at, based upon the size and the proposed use, the size of the critical loads, and the market segment, the tariffs, the location within the state, where the greatest opportunity is for leveraging state funds to encourage the development of the renewable electric storage market. And one of the goals that we had developed in the solar program that we're applying here is that our goal is to develop the market so that it's a sustained, orderly development that is at the least cost to ratepayers. So that's a mantra that we use frequently: sustained, orderly development at the least cost to ratepayers. And that's the purpose of the RULESS research, is to help us to prioritize the fiscal year 16 and 17 funds based upon where the greatest bang for the buck is with energy storage connected with renewables. So the fiscal year 2016 rebate program, incentives based on energy capacity, not the power capacity, based upon the manufacturer specification sheet. In incentive level of $300 per kilowatt hour with a maximum per project incentive of $300,000 or 30% of total project cost, whichever is less, with a maximum per incentive per entity of $500,000. And the entity is either the end use customer or a third-party owner that's participating on multiple sites. The program eligibility requirements is that the proposed project be net metered and interconnected to the New Jersey distribution system after it's constructed and be connected with a New Jersey Class 1 renewable, either a new or existing system. The site host has paid into the societal benefits charge through a non-residential tariff, has a minimum capacity of 100 kilowatt hours, and the incentive will be paid after the project is constructed and it meets all the program eligibility requirements, primarily the interconnection through the EDC, or our electric distribution company, and all other direct incentives are accounted for in calculating the rebate. No thermal energy storage systems are eligible. It has to be an electric storage technology. It has to be primarily charged through the New Jersey Class 1 renewable system, but some ancillary charging can occur with projects that participate in the frequency regulation market. And it has to be new equipment permanently installed. Excuse me. And the rebate application process, it's an online rebate application process. The instructions and the application materials will be released 1 week prior to March 1st. I believe that's February 23rd. The online application window will open at 9 a.m. on March 1st. Applications will be accepted and time-stamped electronically, and complete applications will receive that timestamp, and incomplete applications will be sent back to cure the deficiencies. And once they're complete, they will be time-stamped. Then an approval letter for the rebate commitment will be sent out shortly after awards are made, and have a 12-month completion deadline, and with a 6-month extension opportunity, but it will forfeit 10% of the incentive if they don't construct within that first year. We have a website devoted to this program. It's at www.njcleanenergy.com. We've asked for questions to be posed through an online process, through an email. That's storage@njcleanenergy.com. And we will update our frequently asked questions document from the questions that we receive online. And if there are any questions this afternoon that we've not taken so far that are unique, I will ask that they be posted or posed to that storage at njcleanenergy.com if I'm unable to answer them today. So with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Todd and Sam.
Great. Thanks, Scott. That was very informative, and as expected, we have a good number of questions. If you're participating in the webinar and you have a question, feel free to go ahead and send it in, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. I'll jump right in here with the first one. Was there a percentage requirement for the amount of energy stored and the energy storage devices to come from renewable sources in your program?
I don't think there was a percentage required, but you have to be participating in frequency regulation to have anything other than the storage coming from the renewable system, I believe. But there was no minimum percentage requirement. But if my answer was incorrect, and as with any of these responses, if they're incorrect or I learn anything differently, I will have our FAQ page updated with that information. So in the case of any of my responses contradict what's on the website or what's in our application materials, what's in the board order, those documents rule, and my inaccuracies are just what they are. Thank you, Todd.
Okay. So next question is, does the energy storage project have to be grid connected as long as it is connected to a Class 1 renewable?
It has to be grid connected and behind the meter of the ratepayer in the state of New Jersey, because the idea is to tie the benefits to the source of the funds.
Okay. We had a couple of questions about thermal storage, and I know that you covered that, but people seem to still be asking whether controlled electric thermal storage, in other words, space and water heaters, are considered behind-the-meter storage devices under your program. People are pointing out that they've been used by many utilities for load management, renewable integration, etc., and have provided cost savings. But are they eligible under the rebate program?
No thermal storage applications are eligible in this rebate program. It has to be electricity storage.
Okay, and I'm assuming that that would also hold true for the solicitation that is anticipated, or do we know that?
I anticipate that to be the case. The last program is their research is dedicated to renewable electric storage.
Right. Okay, somebody wanted to know what's happening to the funds left over from the 9 canceled projects from fiscal year 15.
Those were allocated in a board order, a budget reallocation that took place in January. We have a significant queue of CHP projects on our energy efficiency side, and those funds were allocated to the CHP program.
Okay, so they're not going back into any future storage program then?
No, they're not. And that's another reason why we've started off with small dollar amounts in these programs, and we're attempting to build demand that's commensurate and recommend budgets that are commensurate with the demand, so that there's not a large amount of funds that are an opportunity for other programs to grab, both inside and outside of the clean energy program. So it's some of the logic behind what we're recommending is informed by the budgeting challenges that I believe many of my peer clean energy program managers have experienced.
Okay. Somebody wants to know which 4 are left under construction. Can we say that, or is that proprietary?
I can't remember offhand. I don't know if there's proprietary. I just can't remember at this time.
Okay. Do you have a timeline for the competitive solicitation? That would be the second $3 million program that isn't yet established.
I believe the RU Less research will be coming out in the March-April timeframe, and will enable us to develop a solicitation and go to the board for a request to issue this upcoming solicitation before the beginning of fiscal year 17. So I'm looking at the June-July timeframe as being most probable.
Okay. So this would be running concurrently with the rebate program then?
It could be, yes.
I mean, presumably you can't qualify for both, or?
No, you cannot qualify for both.
Okay. Are the program applications and technical requirement forms available online?
Not yet. February 23rd, 1 week before March 1st, those application materials will be placed online. Many of the forms and the information that we require will be similar to what was required in the first program. And I believe those old application forms are still available online. But they've been streamlined because not all of the information was required.
Okay. Somebody wants to know, what if there's not an existing renewable energy system on the site, yet the building is a good candidate? Can you still secure the incentive? In other words, can you, I guess, if you are proposing to add a new renewable energy system on the site, can you qualify?
Yes, you can qualify, but we have the requirement that the renewable system be commissioned and the whole project be operational in order to get the incentive. And that has to occur within a year, or you're subject to that 10% penalty if it occurs within the 6 months. And if it doesn't occur within a year and 6 months, then you're at significant risk
of
potentially
losing the funds? Okay. Somebody else wants to know, is this incentive level affected by use of the federal ITC for solar and storage? In other words, can the full incentive be awarded if the ITC is also executed?
Yeah, I don't believe that we reduce the incentive based upon the federal investment tax credit, but other direct incentives do. I believe that's one of the FAQ questions covers that.
Okay. This is a question that I'm not sure exactly how you would answer this, but I'm not sure I understand it. How are municipalities matched with energy storage companies for these projects? I guess what they're asking is, is there a process? Is there a matchmaking process of some kind, or how is this happening?
We have not formalized a matchmaking process. It's largely market participants driven by vendors and project developers, EPC contractors with that are in the business. We have a trade ally database. I'm not sure if we have yet populated that with storage vendors, but I'll work with our contractors towards developing that. On our Clean Energy Program website, we have a trade ally database that includes solar, biomass, wind, energy efficiency, home performance with Energy Star contractors. It's called the Trade Ally database. It's searchable by technology type, and I'll try and get that populated with some energy storage vendors.
Okay, great. What is the New Jersey definition of Class 1 renewables?
Wind, solar, sustainable biomass, which is further defined in our renewable portfolio standards rules, landfill gas, anaerobic digester gas from food waste or sewage treatment processes. Those are the primary ones. The legislature included geothermal, even though we don't have the opportunity to produce electricity with geothermal in New Jersey. Wave and tidal action, even though we have no viable projects at this time. But those are the primary ones: onshore wind, solar, and biomass.
Okay. And along similar lines, what changed to allow in this rebate program the system to be primarily charged by Class 1 versus in the previous solicitation it needed to be exclusively Class 1? I'm not sure that's accurate, but that's the question.
Well, in the previous program, we did allow for projects to have some ancillary charging from the grid when they participated in frequency regulation. And that is also allowed in this program. But that's the only New Jersey Class 1 charging that's to occur with the application in the cases of frequency regulation.
Okay, so it really nothing has changed in terms of the requirement that the storage systems be charged from renewables except in cases where they're providing frequency regulation service.
I don't think anything has changed, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Somebody wants to know, how is renewable net metering handled given potential for grid services like regulation?
Well, that's to be determined, I believe. There was a belief in October of 2014 through March 2015 that it would be no problem, that projects located behind the meter could participate in the frequency regulation market without limitation, and that proved not to be the case. My understanding is the entire PJM frequency regulation market is undergoing review now, and that there's no new applications being taken, but it did prove to be an impediment with at least 9 of the projects that we had previously provided an incentive award to. My understanding is that if the renewables are not going to be exporting, that it's not a problem to have a behind-the-meter storage system that will be participating in frequency regulation, but that the majority of these projects would at some time during an annual period be exporting some power to the grid, and that caused a violation with the interpretation of the rules for participation in PJM's frequency regulation market. So,
yeah, you know, I got to just say that we have an upcoming webinar featuring somebody from the PJM ISO who will be speaking on rules and requirements for energy storage in PJM behind the meter and how those systems can participate in things like frequency regulation. That's coming up this month. So if folks on this webinar need that information, and I would suggest that if you're planning to apply for incentives in New Jersey for these sorts of systems, you ought to be very clear about those rules and regulations. Then that would be a really good webinar for you to be on. And Samantha, I think if you could just put up the slide with the upcoming webinar dates, people can maybe jot this down if they don't already have an invitation to it, and make sure that they get on it. So thank you. So you could see it's coming up on February 23rd. It's Energy Storage and PJM Wholesale Market Rules and Requirements. So that would be recommended, folks on this webinar. So next question is, when considering MACRS depreciation basis, as a state incentive, will this value need to be deducted from the project cost for use as calculating basis for MACRS? This is similar to the treatment of the ITC benefit on MACRS basis. So this is a depreciation question. Or will this incentive through state tax codes be considered separate from federal taxation and thus not need to be considered for MACRS purposes? I don't know if you can answer that or maybe recommend a resource. No,
and any time there's a question about taxation, our lawyers require us to refer people to a good attorney, good tax attorney. And we're not encouraged to answer questions about taxation.
Yeah, okay. That's what I assumed. So yeah, go talk to a good tax attorney on that one. What will the later solicitation require, and where will the details be available?
It's to be determined what information will be required. I anticipate that it will follow very much the same processes as the very first solicitation, and will request information to enable an evaluation based upon criteria that are being developed or will be developed through a stakeholder process based upon the results that come out of the RU Less research. The announcement for the program will follow the process we undertook in 2014 and be posted to the website, and it will require staff to go to the board and get an approval to release a solicitation, and then we will release the solicitation via the listserv and posting to our website.
Okay. By the way, I got a note here from one of the folks at VEIC who, no, he's not at VEIC. Where is Charlie?
Honeywell.
Honeywell, okay, Honeywell, market manager. That apparently the 4 remaining projects are posted on the New Jersey CEP website, NJCEP. So if for people who are asking about that, I guess you can go check that out. Thank you, Charlie, for sending that piece of information. Here's an interesting question. Can multiple battery banks be aggregated to meet the minimum 100 kilowatt-hour energy capacity? For example, 10 kilowatt-hour storage units integrated with PV systems.
I don't believe so. I imagine there's a site. I believe that's 100 kilowatt hours per site.
Okay. All right. Well, that answers that question. If there's no award on the $3 million rebate program, does that exclude a project from the $3 million grant program?
I'm sorry, Todd. Can you ask again?
Yeah, the questioner wants to know if you tried to get I guess if you submitted a project for a rebate and on the first $3 million program and did not get it, does that exclude the project from attempting from being submitted or from getting a grant under the second the $3 million solicitation that will follow?
Well, the program guides and rules for participation in the subsequent solicitation have not been developed yet. But I would anticipate that there's not going to be any award or points awarded for projects that were not able to submit in this rebate program. That's just I just don't foresee that happening. It doesn't mean it can't, but the rules will be developed through a stakeholder process.
Okay. Can you apply for this rebate program if you are also in the New Jersey Pay for Performance program?
I don't see why not. It's different technologies. This technology, I don't believe, would be eligible for any incentive in the Pay for Performance program. I'll consult with the program managers under Pay for Performance, but I don't see any relationship between the two programs.
Okay. Can one site host multiple individual battery packs whose sum of energy output meets the minimum qualification for the rebate?
I don't know.
Okay. So again, there's a process for this. For if you haven't previously received these questions and considered them, people can send them in, correct?
Yes, to storage@njcleanenergy.com.
Okay, great.
But we would need more information about that request to be able to answer the question. More than likely, they'd need to have two systems, and we'd rather not know about the other system. The system that applies for these incentives, these rebates, needs to meet the program eligibility requirements. Period.
Okay. So if you want to clarify what those requirements are, you can send your questions to the NewJerseyCleanEnergy.com. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or storage at NewJerseyCleanEnergy.com. Okay.
NewJerseyCleanEnergy.com.
Right. So here's a question. How does an energy storage supplier sign up as a trade ally?
The webmaster of the Clean Energy Program website. I believe there's some enabling language that facilitates that process.
Okay.
Visit the Trade Ally database website on our website, and I believe the language is pretty explicit on how to enroll.
Okay. To secure the incentive, I think we've answered this one, but I'll see, maybe there's a nuance that I'm not getting here. To secure the incentive, the energy storage system must work in conjunction with an existing Class 1 renewable system?
Well, it has to be existing at the time that they submit the rebate, or they submit the final as-built paperwork to get paid the rebate. It doesn't need to be existing at this point in time. It can be proposed, but at the time that you submit your paperwork to get paid for the incentive, it has to be operating as a full system, storage with the New Jersey Class 1 renewable system.
Okay. We're continuing to get questions from people who want to know if they can install several storage units at the same site and tied to the same renewable system. And I'm not sure exactly what the point is, but we continue to get these questions, so I think that they're not hearing the answer or they're not getting the information they're looking for. So is there an opportunity to qualify for a rebate if you have several battery units tied to the same, for example, PV array at a single site?
We have not required applicants to vet their projects through the electric distribution companies to see if they'd be eligible to interconnect. But in this case, I would like to encourage those commenters, folks with questions of those sorts, to go and see if this is something that is kosher with the electric distribution company, because it doesn't sound like it's off the shelf or a common application that we are likely to see. This sounds very, like a unique request, and if you're not eligible to interconnect the storage behind the meter, you're not going to get a rebate through this program. So you should do some due diligence with your electric distribution company to see if you'd be eligible for that type of an application.
Okay, thank you. Also, the person who previously asked about net energy metering is asked again regarding net energy. I'm sorry, not metering. Net metering. Net metering the energy from the renewables. Is that going to be? Is that possible in these systems? In other words, can you both qualify, with a system that's going to potentially provide frequency regulation, potentially provide behind-the-meter benefits to the facility, and also can you net meter, export under a net metering interconnection?
Well, right now, I believe PJM has a problem with behind-the-meter facilities participating in the frequency regulation market. We've also had our electric distribution companies say that they will require a level 3 interconnection study for projects that propose to be located behind the meter and wish to net meter. The level 3 studies that the EDCs will perform are less rigorous than the common level 3 interconnection, but it's still a more involved review than typical interconnection and even interconnection of storage that involves load shifting or emergency backup. So it's projects that will participate in frequency regulation are going to be scrutinized more closely, and you should do some additional due diligence outside of this rebate program with PJM and with the electric distribution company to make sure that you're not spinning your wheels.
Okay, very good. In the previous program, you said that there was money reallocated to a CHP program after some of those systems canceled. Somebody wants to know how much was reallocated to the CHP program.
Oh, I can't remember offhand. It was approximately $1 million. That level of detail, I believe, is included in the order that that was issued as a result of the March agenda meeting on January 27th on our Clean Energy Program website, or actually on the board's website. We have a list of the agendas for each of the agenda meetings, and you can find it's typically item 8. I would say it's probably 8C from the agenda on January 27th, and you can get a copy of that order and determine what the amount was. Okay. Or you could get the order that the board approved those awards, find the report that Charlie recommended on the program activity page on the Clean Energy Program website and calculate it yourself. But it was about $1 million.
Okay, thank you. We have other questions, but I think we've expended our time, and I'm going to encourage the folks that haven't received a response or are not satisfied with the response to, submit those questions to storage@njcleanenergy.com. That's probably the best way to do it. There were some very specific and detailed questions about battery packs being used in place of inverters, and I think this is the kind of thing where you probably need to provide more information than we can really provide through a 1 or 2 sentence question on a webinar, and maybe provide some background information on the technology that you're talking about to get a reasonable response, and a reasoned response. So, I encourage you to submit those questions. And Scott, thanks so much for coming and doing the webinar. I think it's been very informative. I also want to allow a little time for Samantha to give some information on upcoming webinars, because I think there are some that will be of interest to people on this call. Again, thanks everybody, and I'll pass this over to Samantha.
Thanks, Todd. So we do have some upcoming webinars related to this topic that folks might be interested in. There's a list of those on your screen, and you'll find more information about all of these at CESA.org/webinars. All of these webinars are free, and we hope you can join us on these future dates. Thanks very much, everyone.